to start by telling us a bit about what you guys do and what you're working on at the moment?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm David Bowden. I'm a bass player based in Glasgow. Mostly doing jazz stuff, but also kind of some folk stuff and kind of freelance like session work, like sort of singer-songwriters and things like that. The thing I'm busiest with is probably the Fergus McCready trio. So that's like a kind of jazz folk kind of crossover project. We've done a few albums, like a fair amount of touring with that. And yeah, so that's like quite a busy thing. And I've got my own band, which is called Mezcla, which is more of like a fusion thing. We released an album like 2020, and then we've got a new EP on the way just now. And then yeah, just kind of like various sort of like freelance projects kind of as and when they come. So for example, like this project would be one of those. Yeah, you want to go?
Yeah, my name is Michel Meis. I'm based in Luxembourg, come from Luxembourg. I'm currently living in Germany, in Saarbrücken, maybe you know the place. It's pretty near by the near the border, so it's like 1 hour go from Luxembourg. And yeah, I'm doing jazz. More than metal. Metal was like more than 10 years ago there. I started with metal, and then I switched to jazz. I have my own band, Michel Meis Quartet. I released until now two albums, and in May I will release the third one. Will be actually an EP with our label, just giving it to the world like that. Yeah, and I'm playing as sideman in several projects like this one, or maybe you know Gilles Greten Quartet. It's a Luxembourgish guitarist, does a lot of projects with orchestra and stuff. And I'm totally interested in electronic music, so hybriding the drums and. Yes, I'm teaching drums and percussion, classical percussion. Yeah.
Questions? Well, I mean, I'm kind of just interested in your program drums. Is it like electronic / hybrid stuff? Like, what do you kind of use?
Actually, I use pickups or microphones to just take the signal of my own drums and put it on through guitar effects.
Oh,
and put some delay, sometimes the octaver for the bass drum, for example, gets a really deep boom. Delay, reverse, reverb, stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. My dad, he plays baran, which you'll know. It's a traditional Irish drum which you play with a beater.
Oh yeah.
And we've been trying to basically electronify that using triggers. It's probably quite similar, but I might need to ask you what kind of pickups you're using after.
Yeah, I'm using the normal, like the typical Roland. I don't know if it fits to the ring of your drums.
We can make it fit. No.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's working pretty good. Everybody asks me, hey, but it just gets a click sound, but it works somehow. Yeah.
Okay, nice. Cool, very cool. I don't know a lot about the scene in Luxembourg. Can you talk a little bit about that and what's going on?
It's really a little scene, but it's quite lovely, and they're really good musicians. I would around about 30 professional musicians in the scene, and actually we have people on every instrument, from singer to drummer. It's quite diverse, and I think it's a more modern than, let's say, traditional. Everybody's writing their own music for their own projects.
Now you mentioned it being very small, because of course Luxembourg is a very small country, and there's only about 30 professional musicians there. Is there a reason that maybe people are maybe more willing to do things like cross collaborate with different things? You mentioned doing classical percussion as well as the drum kit. right now here in like Edinburgh, I don't think I met anyone who's like really focused on both. Most people will choose one of those as a discipline. So is the sort of size of that influence how the musicians will play or what they'll do, and how like generally how.
Actually, we have the program of a conservatory as a school for music. We call it conservatory, and actually most of us went through a classical school. So I'd say everybody of us did a classical study and then specialized into jazz. So we have this background. I will not say that we are totally classical musician. That would not be fair. But we had some studies on classical as well. And for example, me, when I entered into the Luxembourgish metal scene, then I get some looks on this scene, which was quite a nice time. Yeah.
And you also played in the military band.
Yes.
For a while, right?
Yeah, I was in a military band for 9 years. Yes.
So was that mostly classical stuff? Then?
Most, yeah.
Yeah.
Some modern arrangements, but classical stuff.
Yeah, because I would say over here most of the jazz musicians in the scene are not really classically trained. The majority, I would say, are not. Well, maybe. Some are.
I mean, we don't know because we're up in the Edinburgh side. We just, which is kind of not as classically trained.
Yeah.
Glasgow feels a bit more.
Well, I guess going to the RCS, like the jazz, at least when I was there, I'd say that, maybe people have started a little bit, but generally there weren't that many who had really got to a high level on classical. Some, like Pete Johnston would be one, like he's a really good classical player. Fergus is a pretty good classical player as well. But yeah, like that's something I took it up in college just to kind of really work on technique, and I got quite into it, but I would definitely not make any like claims as a classical player.
I mean, I couldn't choose it.
Yeah.
It was like the parts you have to do.
Yeah, because that's not the case at RCS. It's just like a jazz course, and then you've got to pick. If you want to do any classical stuff, you have to pick to do it.
Okay. No, we have to start actually with normal lessons, like
normal.
Yeah, I'd say normal, like classical lessons, and then after one moment you just go to the jazz class.
Yeah.
How did you find RCS?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, when I did it, it was a while ago now. Like, it was only the third year of the course, so it was like, I guess, kind of finding its feet. It changed a lot in my time there, actually. But no, in terms of like the people that were there at the time, that's like the most important thing about, I would say, like, if you're doing music at university or music college, like, it's the people that you're around. You learn more from them than the classes, really. Just kind of hanging out and playing. So I was there at the same time as like some really good people, like Stephen Henderson and like Johnny Wooden, who's playing the gig tonight. He was the year above me. This is the first time we've played together in like for about 7 years. So it's nice to like see him again. At Savlau, like amazing piano player, and there was like Pete Johnston and like Mikey Butcher and all these people. So yeah, it was great in that way, and just kind of hanging out and learning in that way. And then yeah, good teachers and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, and how do you find that, like, kind of in the Scottish scene, like the community between, obviously there's people who have been to RCS and there's like those who haven't, and those who've gone to London to study in Berkeley as well. Like, how do you find the kind of relationship between those type of people and then also like generational community as well?
So as in, how do I find the relationship between people who've gone to music college and those who haven't, do you mean? Or those who've gone to others? Or both?
Well, I mean, kind of both.
Yeah. Well, I guess it kind of doesn't really matter if you've been to music college, just like, it more just matters if you can play or not, really, That's the, so like there's some great players who haven't been to music college, like guitarist called Connor Smith, I don't know if you've come across him, does a lot of kind of swing stuff in Glasgow, plays in that band Rose Room with Shona Aitken. He's about the same age as me, but he's a great player. He didn't go to music college. So it's sort of, as I say, it's kind of about the people who you hang out with and who you learn from. So you don't actually need to enroll in a music college to do that. It just kind of, gives you an excuse to do that, you know. So I'd say, you know, I would like to think there's not a divide, but realistically there might end up being because of almost just more of a social thing.
Yeah.
But definitely it's not something I think about of like, if you're booking people for a gig or something, did they go to meet, have they got a degree in jazz? Like, obviously no one cares about that at all. And then as far as like, yeah, people from other colleges, cool, you know, it's nice to sort of broaden the horizons, and particularly because Scotland's a small scene, so if you only collaborate with people from the RCS, there's only like 6 people in every year. You know, there's not a lot of people.
I mean,
so, yeah.
some would say that you're kind of the start of the new Scottish jazz scene. Just we were talking to Alan Bowie. Was it a couple of days ago? He's a journalist, and he was like really interested in Fergus McCready and what you're doing as well, and just kind of how it's like basically a kind of from his perspective, because he's been interested in Scottish jazz in particular since the 70s. He found it like quite inspiring. It was kind of like a new start in jazz.
Well, yeah, I think I always hesitate to say it's like a new scene, because obviously it's been Scottish jazz. Yeah, it's been Scottish jazz for ages, so you don't want to annoy anyone. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's just the fact that I guess that in Glasgow it's sort of churning people out every year, and you know, generally, hopefully at a high level, you know, so it's, you know, these people have to do something and like go play in places and start bands, so it's almost inevitable really. So I guess the reason it feels like a new scene maybe is just that there wasn't that before. There was the Strathclyde course, which lots of great players came through that, like lots of the people in the SNJO did that course. But yeah, in terms of like a full-time jazz course. But I even feel now, like when I was there, obviously that was like the early days, it feels like, you know, the people who are sort of maybe like 10 years younger than me, there's loads of them. I feel like they've done a really good job of, yeah, like kind of making really good connections with, yeah, musicians from outside the RCS. And, you know, I don't know if you've heard about this Glitch night. So for example, yeah, the Liam runs. Yeah, and Lay Low. Like a lot of the guys who play there, they were not from the RCS, you know, and there's great players. There's like a guy, Joseph Akin, piano player. He's cool. I don't think he went to music. Maybe he did. I'm not sure. And like Nimbus Sextet, a lot of those guys didn't go. So yeah.
Yeah. Nimbus Sextet, that's Hamza.
Yeah, that's
He studied in Napier.
Oh, Napier, yeah. Actually, yeah, maybe they all went to Napier because Joe.
A couple of them.
I think he was Edinburgh based. Yeah.
I imagine a lot of the Edinburgh-based and educated jazz players here probably came from Napier, no? Or the significant.
Well, yeah.
It's a popular course, even though that's not jazz. Like it's maybe more jazz than the University of Edinburgh offers. So.
Yeah, I mean the Napier course is always changing. It's changed again. So the one before our year is actually a completely different course.
Oh, really?
There's no longer a pop / or classical course.
Is there not?
More like year one. It's just the one course. So.
The
interesting.
jazz modules, which did exist and after took, they've been like is no longer they've like closed now, so that's why we started the society to kind of like keep jazz going, I suppose. Yeah. What about the history of like the Luxembourg jazz scene? Is that something which has evolved over like a long period of time, or has it kind of, is it like going through a resurgence as well?
Actually, we had like the old cats, some old cats who actually learned not in school, they learned it like from other musicians, maybe from New York musicians, or they just listened to music, and they were also classical musicians who just learned by themselves while listening to jazz. And I would say my generation is like the third generation who went through school, actually. For example, there was another musician, Mark Demuth, the bass player, who also played today. I would say he was one, maybe first generation or second generation who went through school, I would say. And but yeah, Sorry, the question was.
Like the history of the Luxembourg scene, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it developed like this, and these, let's say, old cats, they were teaching us in conservatory how to play, and they were our teachers. Yeah.
I think that's what's cool about here as well. It's like you'll get people who, like Alan Benzie, Alan Kosker, Mario Caribe, and all those kind of people who they play and they learn, and then they're coming back and they're teaching everyone else, which is really cool as well.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I definitely learned a lot as well doing like the Saturday night jazz bar gigs. You know, they have the world premiere quintet thing where it's like just a different lineup every Saturday. You usually don't even know who else is on it until you get there. And like, I met so many musicians through that, like particularly the sort of ones who are a bit older than me, sort of like Martin Kershaw, like Brian Molly, like a lot of the kind of SNJO-y type people. You learn so much from doing that, just kind of getting on gigs where people are way better than you, and then just kind of having to survive.
Yeah, and do they usually call them standards?
Yeah, that gig is very much standards. It's generally like quite accessible stuff, but I don't know, like they might play stuff that's really fast, for example, and then you're like, oh god.
Yeah. How do you find the relationship between like, because obviously I feel like the tradition of jazz, of like learning and playing a lot of standards, it's kind of, now people are leaning more towards starting and like making their own sound kind of off the bat, and like, what's your opinion of, I suppose, what is your opinion of standards and the traditional like jazz idea of just learning and playing standards like, a lot of the time?
You were talking about this the other day. Do you want
I talked about this the other day. Yeah, I talked about this the other day.
Yeah, you can go first.
I can just talk for myself. For myself, I love playing standards, and I learned so much about my own music while playing standards. I mean, somehow it's the bass, it's your ground from where your music and your ideas come from. Improvising over a grid, and learning. If you go back a little bit, learning how I don't know. Let's say Mark Turner learned from an older saxophonist, and how he plays today and how modern it is, but it developed over the whole time. So I think for me, but I can't just speak for myself. I think it's really important to work on standards, to work on this on the history of jazz, to understand what jazz is, and to create new forms of jazz. Yeah. And if we can call it, let's say in 50 years, if we are still calling it jazz, I don't know, but maybe it will develop into something new. And maybe, yeah.
Yeah, for me it's kind of like, I really like listening to standards and I enjoy playing them. I kind of don't feel that's necessarily the thing that I have to offer personally. I don't think it's the thing that I do the best. Or, I don't know, I kind of feel like there's people who do that so well that it's like, why would I kind of really push myself doing, if that makes sense? You know,
yeah,
I mean,
no, that makes complete sense.
Whereas I feel like writing my own music, you know, and then I can sort of incorporate different influences, sort of feels more personal to me. It feels like more of a cohesive thing rather than, you know, me trying to play like a Coltrane tune. But then there's people who that is their thing. So someone like Helena last night, like you hear them and like amazing, like so into the tradition. So and that is their thing that they have to offer, and it's cool. Not that Helena doesn't write amazing tunes as well, they do. But yeah, then having said that, I feel like it is really important to practice and learn standards in the same way that, like, if you're a classical player, you'd play Bach a lot, you know, to get better. Like, I think generally you can tell, especially if someone's sort of playing fusion and they haven't really spent any time with standards, you can kind of tell not that it's even necessarily a bad thing, but I think being versed in that lineage is important. Getting that vocabulary together. It's that thing about learning the rules so you know how to break them, type thing.
Yeah. Did you you said you come from a trad perspective on jazz, and so is that like kind of, or when I say trad, Scottish trad, sorry.
Not really. I've come into that more probably in the past like 5 years.
Okay.
So because I'm from London,
Ah.
so I don't come from a Scottish trad scene at all. I actually got into jazz more through like funk and soul and like Motown and stuff. So I got really into particularly like Motown records. I was like getting into the musicians on the records and found they were all jazz musicians. And I was like, oh well, if they're that good, maybe I should also learn jazz. And then I kind of got into it that way. I was playing electric bass and then I took up upright. And then I moved up here and did all the jazz stuff. And then it's more like being in Glasgow, there's a lot of folk stuff around, so I kind of gradually got into it, particularly from playing with Fergus and Hendo, because they're really, really into it. So that's been more of a gradual thing, for sure.
So I've been playing Scottish trad music longer than you have.
Yeah, you probably
Still
have.
worse.
Well, I wouldn't even really call myself like a trad player, but as in, I was in a band called Doska. Well, still kind of, we sort of do stuff, but not really that much anymore. That's like a kind of folk rock thing, like bagpipes with like rock rhythm section. And then also I play with a few like kind of folk singers, like Beth Malcolm and Robin Adams, people like that. And that's, like more of a trad thing. I wouldn't really like play on a session though.
Okay. Yeah, I guess the kind of how we look at it now is we kind of go through Scottish trad is kind of like the way a lot of it's like at least where I'm from like the Highlands, and it's like the way to get into music kind of thing.
Yeah, whereabouts in the Highlands?
Northwest, Lochimber, Actagui.
Oh, cool.
Yes, but surprised you didn't heard of it. But yeah, it's like just way out in the way. But there's lots of great musicians that come from there. Anna Massey is, she's kind of claptol based, but she's a brilliant musician. But kind of not from the jazz perspective, I guess.
Yeah.
Different kind of perspectives. But is there much trad scene in Luxembourg as well, or is
cultural scene, like
folk traditional folk
actually,
music.
that's why I really love your folklore music, because we in our region we have polka maybe. Yeah. Like more military influenced music on folk, like I said, marching music, let's say like that. And then maybe old Luxembourgish folk song, but it's not the same. Like we don't have this kind of music you have here. This tradition. We don't live it as you do in Scotland.
Yeah.
So
a lot of it has been changed because of traditional music has evolved, especially since jazz started taking hold, especially in like Europe during like the kind of between First World War and Second World War. That was kind of when that stuff started to happen, or at least from what I've read. Don't know for sure.
And so you've just been on a tour, obviously, around the Highlands, kind of.
Yeah.
How did you find the audiences?
That was actually great. I had no idea what that would be like. Because we have done gigs up north before, and sometimes we've really struggled to pull in an audience. But I think it was 6 gigs, and there was probably about 100 people there every night, which is...
That's fantastic.
Happy with that, cool with that. No, that was a great tour. Like, we really liked it, and I think we definitely want to do another one like that.
Yeah. And how did you find, have you been on tour a lot? In the past?
I mean, some people are on tour like all the time, but I would say I've done my fair share.
How do you find the set you play when you've played it before the tour compared to your last gig or your last couple of gigs?
I think it depends a lot on the band, how you approach kind of playing live. But so, for example, in the trio, every gig is completely different. Well, completely different. As in, we don't plan the sets at all. So there's probably about 25 tunes that we all know that could get pulled out at any point.
Surprise.
Yeah, genuinely. So often the gig will start, Fergus plays something and he goes into something and kind of hints at it and you're like, okay, it's that. And then we play, but different bits might get stretched out, different bits might have like different grooves. Maybe we'll start a tune but then go into a different one, you know. More recently we've even been playing like folk songs as well, like folk tunes. So really every gig is different. So in terms of like the way it is at the end from the beginning, I don't know, they're all just kind of different. Whereas I've done tours before where definitely, I had a band called Square One a while ago, which was with Pete Johnston, Stephen Henson and Joe Williamson. I don't know if you know him, guitarist. He doesn't actually play anymore, but really good guitarist. And with that band, it was maybe all a little bit more, there was still a lot of improvising, but it was a bit more structured. And with that, it was just kind of like, it started a certain way and it just got wilder and wilder and wilder to the point where like by the 7th gig in a row you're like, oh, I don't know, I kind of preferred the 3rd or 2nd gig, you know. This is getting a bit too much. So yeah, it kind of goes that way. But then if you're doing like a pop gig, it's going to be the same every time, pretty much.
So I mean, obviously it's kind of jazz and it's improvised and you just have an understanding between the musicians. But how do you approach, you know, Fergus is playing something or anyone's playing something and then they just don't like do what you're expecting to do? What's your, and this is for both of you, like what's kind of, how do you, what's your consciousness of reaction? If that makes sense.
You need really good ears. Yeah, and I try to do on my last album now. We try to do some free songs, like maybe just with a red line of groove, or I said, okay, I want to have like a lot of chord changes, for example, as just an input from my part, and then we just jumped into the pool to play, and there are some funny stuff coming out actually, but actually you need to you have to feel comfortable with your musicians, and you have to trust. Thank you. You have to trust your musicians on what they do, and that they know where it could go, and then you just follow, or maybe you pull them on stuff like that. Yeah. But that's I'm talking now about totally improvised, free music. I mean, you play tunes and maybe you do changes from one tune to the other. I don't know.
Well, like there's some tunes, for example, where we don't really have solo forms anymore. Like we used to have chord structures, and we still play them sometimes, but there's the freedom to not do that at all. You know, and just do something completely different. And it's as you said, it's knowing the musicians and kind of, I guess, also knowing the aesthetic that you're trying to create. So if you're doing like a completely free set, no barriers, you know, often that can go really pretty crazy. And if you're all up for that, cool. Like in the context of, for example, like a Fergus McCready trio gig, that would be a bit maybe out. You know, it's not like congruous, or if that's the right word. But yeah, I think it is that thing of just using your ears, and then you just make a decision, like, are you going to go with it, or are you going to sort of keep, particularly as a bass player, just keep grounded? And both are valid, because sometimes they might not want you to go with it. It's sort of like it's supposed to be contrary to what you're doing, or you can go with them, and then that's a whole other thing. There's not really any right or wrong. It's just like kind of playing a lot and just getting used to other people's playing, but just being open to stuff. I feel like almost with the trio, for example, people sort of say like, oh, I don't know how you'll like do all this like improvised stuff, but honestly it feels like luck a lot of the time. It's just, I feel like the more you play together, the luckier you get in that you kind of catch these little things together. So there will be little moments every now and then, oh, that was cool, that worked out really well. I didn't not know what was happening there, so, you know. I don't know. You might be watching a gig and sort of think the musicians know exactly what's happening, but they might be like, I don't really know where we are. Like, but we're gonna style this out.
Yeah, you just said there is no right or wrong. maybe there's a wrongish
Yeah, I mean,
side.
it can go wrong. That is true. Yeah.
Because if you as an audience, you can feel if the musicians are not into it,
Yeah.
even if they're faking it.
I think facial expressions tell a lot. I've got a pretty bad giveaway face when
Yeah.
I play, so.
And you feel it as an audience, and you also feel it as a musician when your band members are not feeling it. Like, it's a vibe which is creating.
Do you mean feeling it as in like enjoying it, or feeling it as in being secure in what they're like?
Yeah, both. I think.
Because I think sometimes there can be things that you think went really wrong, and then you listen back, it's like, oh, that actually still sounds really good. But there's a Brad Meldau thing, I can't remember what it's on, it's something blues or something, where he flips the beat around, and for the whole, he's like a beat away from where he's meant to be for the whole solo, but it sounds really cool. And then he's since said that actually that was a complete mistake, like he just really got lost. But then they liked the way it sounded, so they kept it, you know. So yeah, I don't know, yeah.
Yeah, but maybe it will still be weird to listen it back.
Yeah.
Because he knows that it was wrong.
Yeah, I'm sure he probably doesn't like listening to it.
Yeah, I think it does take like being comfortable and knowing musicians to be able to have those happy accents. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, we're gonna play one tune tonight, which has a, let's say, a melody structure, and then goes on something, and then it goes until something to something which actually we don't know yet.
That's spoilers.
Yeah, there's one with a kind of free chord progression for sure.
Okay, we'll look forward to that.
What, second tune, third tune, something like that? Anyway.
I wanted to ask about like both of your experience of like representation within the Scottish scene and also the Luxembourg scene. Like, I don't think there are any women playing this festival event from Luxembourg. Like, what do you kind of feel about that representation and
Female representation.
Female and like other types of representation, I suppose, also like intergenerational and then
Racial, I guess.
yeah, as well. Like that kind of representation and how, like, what kind of barriers you think there are to that. If that makes sense.
Actually, the second question was hard to understand now.
Okay, so basically representation.
Yes.
And then
On what?
on gender.
Just like
race.
diversity.
Diversity. Okay.
Diversity.
Yeah. I mean, it's a topic which is, I'm living in Germany, and there also it's a big topic, and it's also a necessary topic, because as you see also in Luxembourg there are not that many female jazz musicians. I mean, there are a lot of female musicians, but maybe they don't go into jazz. I don't know why the reason, and I'm not I'm not a specialist into why. So, but I think one reason could be in the beginning of learning the instrument, and how teacher reacts to a little girl when she gets woman when she wants to get interested into jazz, maybe pushing her and showing her some idols, some heroes, female heroes, and not just man heroes. So, but yeah, in fact, there are less female musicians in Luxembourg. I mean, we have some singers.
That's often the case here.
Yeah.
I think singers is kind of just like the.
Yeah.
If
And
you're
that's just
thing, yeah.
that's just a fact that there are a lot of singers. Yeah. I mean, I have a girl in my band, which is actually also my girlfriend, but that's
It's not the point. It's not the point.
that's not the point. Yeah, and I think, yeah, there's all, yeah, it's hard to, I mean, my English is not that good to go totally deep into that topic. Maybe you can.
It is a tough one, especially it's hard to talk about obviously as a white male.
Yeah.
So obviously my experience of it isn't probably going to reflect the true nature. But essentially, yeah, I mean, there are just so many more guys than girls, for example. But like, I run a jazz group in a high school in Glasgow, just like a normal state school. And actually that's, I think, it's either half and half, or there's maybe even slightly more girls than boys, which is great. But then when you see the music college level, it tends to be way, way more boys than girls. It's like normally, well, when I was at RCS, for the 4 years I was there were no girls at all on the jazz course, which was crazy.
None at all.
There was not one.
Jeez.
Yeah.
There's not. I mean, the RCS jazz course is quite small, though, isn't it? Like, they only
Yeah.
takes a select few members.
To be fair, they did accept girls in that time, but none of them came. So I know like Helena got a place, for example. I think some others, but just as it worked out. But yeah, that was crazy. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to know what to say about it, really. Obviously it's not where it needs to be. I do think it's getting better, particularly in Glasgow. There's more than there were. But still to the point where you can kind of count them. So it's not great. And also it's interesting, the thing about singers, there's obviously more singers. It tends to be less common to find female rhythm section players.
Yeah.
And I don't really know why that is. Like, I don't know of any
yeah.
piano players. I don't know of any female piano players in Scotland, really. I might be missing one.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I only know I've only met one person who is a woman who played in like jazz rhythm sections. Like one person, that was their thing.
Yeah.
In my life, which is insane. You know.
Yeah. There's more in London, but there's also more people in London. So I feel like it probably is still just the same issue, but it's just there's more because there's more people. In terms of like racial diversity, I guess, again, that's not really where it needs to be. But also, like, Glasgow's not actually that diverse a city compared to the other big cities in the UK, like London, Manchester, Birmingham, wherever. Like, Glasgow's quite far behind that.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I grew up in the south side of Glasgow, so I grew up in quite a multicultural area, and I was quite shocked.
Whereabouts?
Kind of near, like Govan Hill, Shawlands area.
Oh, cool. I'm in Battlefield.
Oh,
So,
right.
yeah.
You really are not too far from where I stay.
Cool.
It is.
Yeah, Govan Hill. That's a diverse area. There you go.
It's like Govan Hill, Battlefield, Shawlands, these places, but yeah. Apart from that, it's not a very diverse city.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Edinburgh's even probably worse, actually. And you don't see that many people here at all, and if they are, it's kind of they're just students here from abroad that pay a ridiculous amount and then go home.
Yeah, I find the school I teach in the East End, that is a bit more diverse. But I think it's just that thing of like people moving to the city. I think give it 20 years, it'll probably feel a lot more diverse then, but it's just, I guess, I don't really even know why, but it's just taken longer. I guess, I don't know, haven't done the research.
No, it's fine. It's kind of it's very easy to like, especially because I didn't really think about it until I came to university. Like how in Scottish traditional music, it's kind of the women play the fiddle and that's it.
Yeah.
They don't play anything else.
Or
certainly
sing,
don't play the pipes in a kind of session kind of view. So it's definitely something which I didn't really think about until coming here. And because of university, there was like some interesting papers even on just like how everything is kind of laid out.
Yeah.
That's okay.
I guess it's kind of the same thing. It's like, I can think of like, there's like Bridget Campbell, there's a female piper, but it's almost like they're the exception that proves the rule. You know, because you're like, oh, there's one. Oh, yeah, there's one. Like, yeah, it's not. So yeah, it's hard to know what to say about it. Obviously, things it just needs to kind of develop. I'd like to think that it's inclusive, but it's obviously hard for me to say. And there is the fact that if you're seeing a load of white guys playing, then, you know, that is what it is. That's why it's important, obviously, to have representation on, you know, festivals and things like that.
I think maybe there's also a thing that a lot of the instruments associated with jazz are often quite associated with masculinity. Brass is quite associated with a lot of, basically every brass player I've known, apart from like a couple, have been men. And then also I think guitar and drums And again, you mentioned the rhythm section.
Yeah, but I think that's something which is changing
Yeah.
right now. And it's sometimes we are also just talking about that topic, like to change it from now to now. And I think it's a problem which took so many years, and it needs to get, and it deserves to get treated like like good, and not just like that. I'm not a fan of a quote. I think there's a pro and contra for quote.
Pros and cons, yeah.
Yeah. I think that we have to for example, in my class, I have 40 students. And I would say like the half of them are girls and women. Half of them. And back in the days when I was a little boy, it was not like this. Maybe there was one or two girls in the class from a teacher who had 40 students. So there is something changing, and we have to give it a chance. I don't think that we can force it from now to now. We have to give it a chance, and we have to push them to get on the track. And yeah. And show them like the female heroes or diverse heroes.
Yeah.
And idols.
Yeah. The other aspect of diversity as well, which is is like class diversity as well. Like particularly when you come through music college, it's heavily middle class skewed.
Yeah.
As I'm the evidence, but like including myself.
Again, for me, it's kind of difficult to kind of perceive that, because I came from an area which were kind of just all kind of just, lower kind of just, and when I came here, it was kind of the big city. That kind of gave me the shock anyway. So I didn't really think about that. Yeah.
But it comes
Sorry,
down
Zach, you come into the deep
I
don't know.
Well, a lot of it comes down to, I guess, money and opportunities, because I mean, to use the music college example again, like to get into a music college at the age of 17, 18, you need to have had a few years really like practice, and like you have to work. For example, if you wanted to study jazz, you need to kind of have worked out that you want to do that a few years before. Usually to get that bug, you're doing like workshops, summer courses, and these things, they're not free. Also, if you're in, say, a private school, there's just going to be more opportunity. You're going to have more, like, it's just more stuff to do. Also, maybe there's like people are being more, I guess they're seeking out opportunities like that more. That's what I find a lot, like working in state schools in Glasgow. It's like they're not even seeing that as a thing. It's not even on the radar. Whereas if you're at a private school, it's like, oh, you could go to music college, So it's that's another aspect of diversity that I think needs to change. And I think that's one that it's a bit easier to see the direct way out of it, which is just kind of, I guess, like, putting it more opportunities, more like that are free or cheap.
It's quite shocking. I think a lot of it. I'm pretty sure places like the RCS, and I believe specifically like Royal College, Royal Music College London, has more private school, proportionally more people from private school than Oxford and Cambridge do. Like
Probably, that wouldn't.
It's an insane amount of like people.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
It's really kind of shocking. Even here at Napier, not tons of people here went. I don't think many people, no few people who went to private school, but a lot of them either had a private tuition growing up, or B were got involved in a program that helped them that no longer exists now. That it's just it's like lost its fun.
Well, if you're in Glasgow in a normal school and you get lessons as part of that, you get free lessons, which is great. But like they're 25 minutes long. By the time you got the instrument out of the case, you can, and if they're a bit late, which they often are, like you could be like 20 minutes, even less. Like I've had some really good pupils I've really enjoyed teaching, but I think to get them to the level of like applying to music college, it's just not. It's so hard. Like there's people I think who could have done it, or could do it, but to get them to actually, they would need to get lessons outside of school for sure.
Yeah, it's the issue with music in high school at the moment. I'm not sure what it's like in Luxembourg, but in Scotland it's like it's dialed back.
Yeah, very
it's
dialed
very
back.
easy, but like if there's it's the equivalent of grade 5 is advanced higher, which is the highest level you can do, and then like all the universities are expecting grade 8. So
Yeah.
where does that
Oh yeah.
kind of
Yeah,
so you have it basically kind of forces you to pay for it.
that is the problem. Yeah, but I've had pupils who will get like a really good mark in advanced high, and they're like, oh, I want to go study music. It's like, okay, great, but there's a big gap now. Like you need to close this gap somehow. You know, because even for not even music college, like just a university, like they're wanting kind of grade 8 vibes, aren't they? Normally.
Yeah. It's also in Scottish schools they ask for you to do 2 instruments, your second and your main instrument. And
Yeah, I think that's wrong.
And you only really receive lessons in one, unless there's a case where they think you're actually going to go to like study music, and even then, sometimes it don't happen. When I studied, I grew up in south side of Glasgow. Said went to Sean's Academy. I was able to get 2 lessons for my higher advanced higher, and that's because the music saw that I was probably going to go and do music at some point. So they're like,
Yeah.
give that, and
I probably know your teachers. Who were your teachers?
I don't know, should I say their names here? This is Mr. Brogan.
Oh yeah, I know who that is. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a really cool guy. He used to go to the Old Strathclyde. I think he studied at the Old Strathclyde course, which is now disappeared, unfortunately.
Yeah. We got a bit off the jazz topic,
Yes.
but it's an interesting one.
I'm conscious we need to finish up.
Oh yeah, we
But I
should get
have
food
2 questions
sometimes.
from Helen. So first of all, from Michel, there's you're called Michel Meis, and there's a pianist called Michel Nice.
Right.
Do you ever get like mixed up with them?
Yes.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, Michel Rice and Michel Meis. It's a pain. There was one funny interview I gave, and in the teaser, actually I went to radio and I was presenting my band, so like this project, Michel Meis Quartet, and in the teaser on social media there was written, yeah, Michel Meis is presenting his new band, the Michel Rice Quartet. We have to deal with it. It's but it could be worse. I mean, it's a damn good pianist, which yeah.
That's true.
You might get some sweet gigs by mistake.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, in fact, I played one gig at the Philharmonie in Luxembourg, and a couple came. Oh, we're supposed to come to a concert of Michel Rice.
Unlucky.
Now you're here.
Lucky.
Yeah.
And then his question for you was, what was the name of the cat you stole upstairs from you?
Sammy. So he basically, there's a mezcla tune that we play on most gigs, been playing it for ages, called Sammy's Tune. And just I always have the same chat on every gig because that's what the tune is about. It's like I named it after the cat that lived upstairs from me. I say that on every gig because it's still true on every gig. And then they all just make fun of me for like saying the same stuff. But yeah, I don't know.
Oh, you have to research rehearse your pattern.
I know, yeah. But yeah, there you go. It's kind of not really that funny, but kind of funny, maybe. I don't know. They seem to like it.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for coming to speak to us.
Cool.